Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday, and it's Wellness Wednesday today. I'm Dr. Laurie Davis, your host of the Today Show, and I'm going solo today. And every once in a while, I like to do that because I have things that I need to say and I need to share as well. So sometimes I like to be my own guest. We're streaming live right now on my two YouTube channels, Laurie Davis Show Host, 5 Minutes to No Limits, Laurie Davis Facebook page. And the one thing that I would like to encourage you to do is share the show. Every show we do is so rich in content, and people may need to hear what we have to say. Maybe one thing that we have to say could change somebody's day, could change the direction that they take, could make a difference in the next decision they make. So we love our shows because of the content, the quality of people that we interview, and we know we have a winner. So I would encourage you to share the show and tell your friends, because what's that old shampoo ad? Two friends, tell two friends, tell two friends. Because that's the best way to get the word out about anything. And years ago, I was with the Mary Kay organization, and those were the days when Mary Kay Ash would come to Canada and train us and spend time with us. And she told us back then, this was before technology, she said there's 3 ways to get the word out: telegraph, telephone, and tell a woman. So telegraph, well, that's social media today. What a great way, what a great vehicle we have to get the word out there. So today we focus on wellness, and that has become very near and dear to my heart, having been through, and some of you already know the story. Recently, I had emergency bowel surgery, and my small intestine had attached itself to an old scar tissue from an appendix scar that I acquired when I was 5. So for decades, my small intestine, the opening to it, was getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I had signs like I couldn't eat spicy foods. And then I thought, oh, I've developed a lactose intolerance that's upsetting my stomach if I have ice cream, different little things like that. But that opening was getting smaller, smaller, smaller. And finally, it just completely blocked off. And I had no idea that one could have such pain. My pain threshold isn't very high anyway, but that day that happened, just like that, it was like 20 out of 10. I could hardly breathe. I thought I was having a heart attack. So my husband took me to emergency, and from there we went to a bigger center, and then I had the surgery. So I'm home today. It's been 2 weeks since I had surgery. And I took a week and a bit to rest and recoup. Would you call that a trauma? Because I got to thinking about trauma while I was in the hospital, because I got to see a lot of people who were traumatized. And we hear a lot about the word trauma. So today I kind of wanted to break some things down, and I'm just calling it the trails of trauma, because we are all survivors of trauma. You don't escape this planet without having some kind of traumatic event. And if you're living that kind of a life, well, then you're in a basement somewhere, not doing anything, not going anywhere, not functioning. There's no way really to protect ourselves, because we never know when trauma may occur. So let's look at some situations that I would call traumatic events. Even from birth to the time we're about 18, we have so many traumatic things that can happen to us. But I'm 75, I'm a baby boomer, and I'm from that generation where you didn't talk about things. Shh. If anything went down, It was a secret. It was a secret. So you weren't allowed to go outside and talk about what was going on in the home, whether it was family violence, whether it was finances. They were never discussed. And it was a life of not allowing us actually to acknowledge trauma in a way. So for some people, being born is traumatic because maybe I was a C-section, maybe I was premature, maybe I was breached, maybe I came into the world with a disability, maybe I was in an incubator for a month and didn't get to see my folks. So birth can be very traumatic just in itself, if you think about it. And then depending on where I land, lots of trauma can take place. So let's look at some situations. When I'm from the time I get home from the hospital until I'm ready to go to school, what can happen? Well, maybe there's not enough food in the house. Maybe there's no dad or mom. Maybe I was put up for adoption. Maybe I wasn't adopted and I'm in foster care. How traumatic would that be? I had a client, he was 18. By the time he was 3 years old, he had been in 36 foster homes. And then people wonder what's wrong with our young people? They're not this, they're not that. Well, when you look at the trails of trauma that they've already experienced, it's mind-boggling. And then culturally, I have a book I'm going to share with you today. It's called The Pain Didn't Start Here. This is a friend of mine, Dr. Denise Hicks. She autographed it for me when she gave it to me. I love it. And this is about trauma within the African American community and how generationally that is why things are the way they are today. And then, of course, if we talk about our Indigenous community, our immigration community, nobody escapes. So, you know what? A lot of people are going around with this big, living in a bubble. They don't think anything bad has ever happened to them. Really? Well, that's called denial, classic denial. So 0 to 5, lots can happen. When I was 5, and this came up for me in the hospital, when I was 5, I had 3 traumas in my life that I remember. One, my little sister next to me contracted polio during the great epidemic in Halifax in the 50s, which left her disabled. 2, my tonsils got infected and I had to have surgery and get those out. And 6 months later, my appendix ruptured. And that appendix, that trauma, is why I was in the hospital 2 weeks ago. You see how trauma stays. It doesn't leave us. We don't ever forget it. And if you think of all of your traumatic events, you'll have clear memory of what you were wearing, who was there, what the building looked like, etc., etc. So what else can be included as a traumatic event? Well, let's say I've grown up in a neighborhood and all of a sudden my dad's work is taking us away somewhere where we don't know anybody. For a little 7-year-old, that's traumatic because now I'm going to go away and miss all my friends. A move can be very traumatic. So at 6, I'm off to school. Oh, and by the way, between 0 and 5, we can be sexually assaulted. We can be verbally abused. We can be physically beaten up. There's lots of ways to abuse children, and those are all traumatic events. Now, we're going to talk about generational trauma in a bit, how that spills down into the next generation. But right now, just directly, I want everybody to realize you have not escaped any trauma. And if you think you have, then you're in denial. Not acknowledging, not being aware. But one of the behaviors about trauma is we do everything to avoid it. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to relive it. So we stay away from it, which is the worst thing in the world you can do, because the only way you can heal from that is to confront it and embrace the feelings that were attached to it. See, we don't remember it's not about the incident. The incident It's about the feelings that are attached to the incident that we carry with us throughout our lives. And then we start operating with this veil around us of trauma. But we'll get into that. Let's talk about, now I'm off to school. What kind of traumatic events can happen at school? Come on. I was a teacher. I watched it. Kids making fun of other kids because maybe they weren't perfect. Maybe they had some kind of disability. Maybe they weren't as smart. Maybe they couldn't learn quickly. I mean, children can be very cruel. Have you noticed? And I used to discourage that at every step of the way. Trauma. An abusive teacher. I saw that too. Teachers would come into work, and I was one of them. Maybe the night before where I had a big fight with my husband and it wasn't resolved. The next day I'd come into school and I'd be yelling more. I would be finding fault. I would not be as patient. And who were my victims? My students. So we can have abusive teachers. We can have abusive parents. Maybe between 6 and 13, that's where my parents get a divorce. That's traumatic. Or you lose a parent. When you lose a parent, it doesn't matter how old you are, it's traumatic. I had both of my parents until I was 67. I lost my dad. My mom's still alive. I'm so blessed. But that was traumatic. Even at 67, that was traumatic. 6 to 13, puberty starts. Oh, gee, my body's starting to change. What's happening? Nobody told me this was going to happen. Am I bleeding to death? What's going on here? Lack of information, lack of communication. That's traumatic. 6 to 13, maybe I'm the kid that doesn't get invited to the birthday parties. Everybody's going to the party on Saturday, but I didn't get an invitation. That might seem like nothing now, but at the time, that's devastating to a young person. Not to be involved, not to be accepted. That's traumatic. Maybe this is where I'm sexually assaulted. Happens a lot. Happens a lot, especially in families. I always used to say to my sisters, don't worry about, oh, we only leave our kids with relatives. I'd rethink that if I were you. Because you see, children have the trust of those relatives. And that's usually, I think it's around 87% of children that are sexually assaulted. It's somebody they know. So, the old guy down the road lives in the trailer, probably a safer guy to leave your kids with. Just saying. I say. 6 to 13, I don't fit in. I don't get picked for the Little League team. I come home and dad's gone. Maybe I have to, bury my grandma and she was my biggest support system. These are examples of trauma that you may not even think were traumatic, because as we get older, we go, oh, that was nothing. I shouldn't have been so upset about that. We dismiss it. And then our lives are reflective of it because we're living our lives out in the trauma. And then we go to high school. Isn't that special to go to high school? Oh my gosh. Whew. What can happen in high school? Lots. Drugs, sex, rock and roll, alcohol, lose my best friend in a car crash. I went to a very large high school in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, Dartmouth High. There were 1,600 kids. In 1967, when I graduated, there were 1,600 kids in that school. And we used to have this stretch of road called the Magazine Hill, but we called it Death Valley, because every weekend the guys and gals would go out there and race. And there was always somebody dying in a car accident. Every Monday morning, the principal would come on and be announcing so-and-so passed away. So losing friends. Maybe I didn't graduate and I was really heartbroken by that. Maybe I didn't get invited to the prom. Maybe I felt ugly, or I was overweight, or. These are all traumatic events. As a matter of fact, speaking of that, I taught high school 1 year. I had left my teaching career, but I was on the substituting list, and I used to get called into the high school quite frequently. And the teachers told me, they said, watch out, watch on Monday mornings, Monday morning. I said, oh, why? Well, we can always tell which kids lost their virginity on the weekend. I went, what are you talking about? And sure enough, the kids would come in on Monday morning, and there you could see it in their eyes, cast to the floor. That vivacious young cheerleader who Friday was just bebopping around and talking to everybody is sitting in the back seat with her eyes to the floor. Wow. What do they say? The eyes are the windows to your soul. So you see, by 18, we've had lots of trauma. And we had people, well-intentioned people, say to us things like, oh, that's nothing. Don't worry about it. You're being too sensitive. We're not going to talk about that anymore. We're not going to talk about it at all. And you see how we get into ourselves with the trauma. And so there's this big, huge conflict always going on. And we're making decisions from that painful place. And that's why we end up marrying the wrong people, picking the wrong career, punishing ourselves because of what took place. We think it's our fault. And we were just kids.
Introducing Veteran House Alliance International Monthly 50/50 Raffle. Purchase your ticket today, link on display, and have a chance to win cash and help a great platform supporting veterans.
Just children. So I would dare you right now, if you're listening or watching the show, to start making a list of the traumatic events that you experienced. They're your life. That's your lifeline. That's your journey. And it's okay. Because if you want to walk around pretending nothing ever happened to you, then you're a liar. And nobody wants to be a liar. But who do we lie to? We wouldn't intentionally lie to somebody else, but guess who we lie to? Oh, it was nothing. I'm over it. But yet your life isn't reflective of that because you're not living it to the fullest. You're not living it to the best that you could be. And we're great at justifying everything. Talked about that this morning in my men's group. Justification.
Introducing Veteran House Alliance International Monthly 50/50 Raffle. Purchase your ticket today, link on display, and have a chance to win cash and help a great platform supporting veterans.
And we all have reasons why we can't trust, or we don't put ourselves out there, or we can justify it all till the cows come home, but it doesn't change anything. And it's all rooted in those traumatic events. Now that's just up to 18. Now we have our adult life. And how much trauma have we endured? Well, I just went through some trauma. I had to be opened up again. I was just opened up 2 years ago. I had cancer surgery, almost in the same area. And that's where I thought, when they said my intestines had attached itself to old scar tissue, I thought it was from my most recent surgery of 2 years ago, when I had a hysterectomy and I was completely cleaned of cancer. And I thought, oh, yes, I had an operation 2 years ago. I had no idea that it was that old incision, an old trauma that revisited me big time 2 weeks ago. And here it is back at it again. I'm going, okay. So I vomited for 2 days. I feel like a whole new person. A friend of mine has a product that helps you to detoxify. And I said, I don't need that. I'm completely detoxified right now, but I'd highly recommend you detoxify your body because it's like a whole new person. And I've been very careful about what goes in there after the fact too. People can't believe I had surgery too. I was out walking the dog yesterday and dropping off some thank you cards, and my neighbors are going, oh my gosh, you just had surgery. What are you doing out walking around? Well, it's because I know how to manage my trauma. And I've had lots of trauma in my lifetime. Big stuff. But sometimes it's not the big stuff that trips us up. It's the little stuff, the little things that we didn't think about. as being traumatic. When a kid fails a grade, that's traumatic. Back in the day when kids didn't make the grade, they stayed and repeated the grade over. That's traumatic. I taught back in the day when there was a strap in the drawer of my desk. I didn't use it, but it was there. And the kids knew it was there. But I could hear other teachers in the hallway. They pull the kid out of the classroom and give them 3 or 4 whacks on each hand. And when I went to teachers college, they actually showed us how to strap a child properly so you didn't get hurt. Seriously? When I think about that, and that wasn't that long ago, that's corporal punishment, right? And trust me, I see some kids today who could maybe use a little smack on the bum. But you know what? We were trained how to deliver that kind of punishment. Well, the day that little kid got that strapping, I will tell you that was trauma. Traumatic for that little kid. And I remember in grade 10, and I've shared this before, my homeroom teacher looked at me, and my marks weren't that great. I wasn't a really good high grade student. I never missed a beat, but my homeroom teacher said to me, you know, Laurie, with those marks from junior high, I doubt very much if you're going to amount to much. Wow. Glad I didn't listen to her. But you see, that's what happens. Somebody in a position of authority, whether it's a parent, a teacher, a priest, a pastor, somebody in a position of authority tells us something when we're children, and we believe it to be the truth. We believe it to be the truth because it came from somebody in a position of authority, especially. You know, we believe everything our mom said and our dad said and our teacher said and our pastor said, and it's just automatic. They're like God, or even our doctor, or, oh, yeah, good one there. You know, we thought doctors were God. The night that my dad took me in to have my appendix operated on, the surgeon who was on duty was drunk. Yeah. And my mom and I just shared that story the other day because I wanted to make sure I had it correct. And she said, oh, yes, that happened. And your dad put that doctor up against the wall and said, you get that nurse to phone somebody else in here now. And that's how that ended up. That was traumatic, to think that the doctor who was going to operate was loaded. And when I was in the hospital this time, I left here in an ambulance to go to our larger center to have an operation right away. But they let me lay there for 4 days and tried some other things and flushed me in and the And finally, on the 5th day, I looked at the doctor and I said, I need my surgery today because I can't lay here like this another day. No food, no water. I was 10 days, no food, no water. There's a trauma. So everything around us is traumatic. Now, and nobody escapes. Nobody. So sometimes when we're in that traumatic place, we think we're the only person in the world. But see, that's the trauma, the veil of the trauma, poor misconceptions, misleading thoughts, your narrative changes. And we're not alone. Right now, as I'm speaking, somebody is trying to take their life on the planet every 40 seconds. Every 40 seconds. Because they haven't learned how to manage the trauma. See? Trauma is real. It exists. It happens. It's going to continue to happen. We have to learn how to manage it. So, as my friend Doug Smith says, it doesn't control you. Trauma in, trauma stays. There's no getting over it. It's always there. But what we have to learn to do is be okay with that and be strong and build ourselves up so that when the you-know-what hits the fan, we're good. You see? But most people don't want to heal anything. So they have all this trauma from childhood, then they have all the trauma from their adult life. And then when the next trauma arrives, everything has piled up, piled up, piled up, and we don't know where to turn. And the doctors told me, they said, we don't know what you're about, but wow, we've never seen anybody your age go through that and come out of it the other side the way you did. But that's because physically, I've been taking very good care of myself. Emotionally, I take very good care of myself. Spiritually, and a big shout out to Hastings at Helping Hands Orphanage in Malawi, Africa. Do you know that those 400 little kids prayed for me? Like, how beautiful is that? The power of prayer, spirituality, and mentally, there's no dementia here. I keep my mind sharp every day. That's why I can't retire. I'm choosing not to retire because I think when you retire, you mentally go downhill. Emotionally, physically. It's like a death wish, man. If you don't exchange it for something else that you'd like to do, maybe you're retiring from a government job or a teaching position or your own business or whatever, then that needs to be replaced. Maybe you're going to retire from that, but it needs to be replaced so you stay sharp. And because I was physically healthy, emotionally stable, mentally sharp, and knew I was going to be okay, then I get to speak up to the doctors and say, I'm sorry. No, that's not happening. This is what's going to happen next. You actually have to tell people today how to do their jobs. You see? So I could have allowed that situation, but I've spent a lot of money on myself. I've spent a lot of time getting healthier and healthier, and I was able to manage the trauma. And that's what we need to learn how to do, because you cannot escape it. If you're trying to think you're going to get away with that, good luck.
We welcome you to advertise and promote your goods and services, and or brand your logo to 34 million subscribers on Canada Talks 167. Your investment will go towards our employment programs in the media industry for persons with disabilities and veterans.
And it has nothing to do really, except our marginalized communities have extra veils of trauma because culturally things have gone down. But trauma is universal. It's not about the color of our skin as to whether or not you're going to have trauma. No. Everybody is involved. So now, I'm not getting any comments today, which is very well. Kathy's put some stuff up. And, it's not really maybe relevant to our conversation, but it's good morning, Kathy. I'm here to tell you that it's important for you to acknowledge and recognize and write it down, your list of traumatic events. And if you can't do it that way, then I just sometimes get my clients make a list of 10 personal losses you've endured, setbacks, disappointments, because your life is reflective of how well you're managing your trauma. If you're not managing it very well, you're only creating more of it. And of course, what we focus on increases. So coming up on I'm going to put a plug in for our event on November 2nd and 3rd. We're going to host an event in Montana Band Reservation over in Musquecheese, Alberta. And it's not about suicide, and it's not about drugs, and it's not about alcohol. It's called Staying Alive. How to stay alive. We need to teach our children how to stay alive in this very chaotic world that we're living in right now. Lots of trauma. Not safe to go out on the streets. Can't walk over to the post office without worrying about somebody going to attack you. Lots of fear. because trauma and fear are so closely related. They're in the same box, so to speak. Right? Then we have what we call generational trauma. So let's go back a generation to our parents. Our parents unknowingly and perhaps not intentionally handed off their trauma to us. And I will give you a perfect example of that. My dad's mom passed away in 1936. She was 46, and my dad was 14. He was the youngest boy in the family and had a sister, a family of 9 kids. And they came home from school one day and she had passed away. She was I believe, in the kitchen. It was a hot day in August. And today we would call it an aneurysm. Back then they called it a brain hemorrhage. And she left this whole family of teenagers. A couple of the older kids had already moved out. And my auntie was 5. She's still alive, my Auntie Phil. 96 maybe now. And there was a traumatic event for all those kids. They just lost their mom. My dad didn't handle it very well. And back in those days, they used to lay the bodies out in the front room. They'd have a wake. People would come and visit, bring food. That's how they did things. They still do that in some communities. And that's a good thing because it gives people a chance to say goodbye, and have those memories and talk to people. I think a funeral is really healing. I don't like this idea that you go and get cremated and nobody shows up and nobody has to show up and be sad. I don't think that's the right thing to do. There's no grieving involved there. So people came and they brought flowers. And back in those days, they used to put flowers in those long gray boxes, maybe like some roses or some cut flowers. They would come in those long gray boxes. So flash forward ahead. I'm 16. We're talking in the 60s. So we're now talking like 30 years later. I get some flowers from a boy in school, and they come in that long gray box. And I loved the box. I wanted to keep the box. And my mom says, "I'm sorry, Laurie, you can't keep that box. We've got to get rid of it before your dad gets home from work." I said, "What are you talking about, Mom? What are you talking about?" Well, she said, Grammy died when she was young and Dad was young. And he could never stand the look of those boxes ever since. So I want to make sure it's out of sight. Flowers, no problem, but that box got to go. So here's trauma traveling down 30 years later to a decision that my mom had to make about my flowers. You see how that works? And that's why I call it the trails of trauma, not the trials, the trails of trauma, because they're generational. They float down, they come back down to us because our parents are operating from their own veil of trauma and making decisions based on that. And then you go to the next generation, our grandparents, our great-grandparents. And then when we parent or we teach, like I did, I passed my trauma on to my students. I was a perfectionist. I was an overachiever. I didn't want anybody to see how I was hurting inside. I could look great on the outside. I knew how to do that. I was in the beauty business for 12 years. I learned how to do that. But on the inside, I felt like crap. And you know what? Hurt people hurt others. I hurt people in my family. I've hurt people that I've worked with. We hurt people when we're coming from that place of trauma that has never been addressed. So I'm asking you right now, take it on, embrace it. And we help people with that every single day. That's what we do. That's the business I'm in. Because if we're not willing to acknowledge or be aware of our own trauma, then we're impacting other people in a very detrimental way. We don't even realize we're doing it. Comments we make, feedback we give, inappropriate behaviors and attitudes that hurt people. You see? So we need to do that. And my dad almost, not quite, but, he embraced my other grandmother, my mom's mom. And even in ways that my mom treated my dad, it was more like someone who was looking after him. Losing your mom's a big thing. Losing your dad's a big thing. And it's trauma, for sure. So now what are we going to do about it? How do I manage it? How do I take care of it? Well, you can't take care of something if you don't know it exists. So the first thing I had to do was to get honest and real about the fact that I had been traumatized as a child, a teenager, an adult woman, a young woman. I didn't know. Are you ready for this? This is how ignorant I was. This is how I had the blinders on. I had been sexually assaulted at the age of 12 by a trusted family member. You know what? I didn't even think for a minute that I'd been a victim. I thought a victim was somebody in a car accident. You see what I'm saying? And I never told anybody until I was in my 40s when I started doing my own work and acknowledging some things that had happened to me. And it came out. And I went, wow, did I ever bury that deep? I didn't even talk about that. I didn't share it with anybody. I didn't tell my parents because of the shame attached to the trauma. Because that's the other thing. Trauma is like a breeding ground for shame. Feeling ashamed of who I am. We just did a group on that. I just did my men's group at 8 o'clock, and that was the whole topic. All the shame that we carry, and that shame is attached to trauma. A traumatic event in our lives. So what did I do to get out of it? Well, the first thing I did is I started not lying to myself, and I came out of denial about the fact that I had been the victim of trauma. Every move we made, every event that took place, sometimes, maybe we were doing something and my dad didn't show up and I was expecting him to be there. That's traumatic. Children need a lot of nurturing, and they need a lot of validation, and they need a lot of love. And I'm so grateful for my parents because I got to experience all of those things. But then no set of parents is perfect, because guess what? They both come into the relationship with their baggage, their trauma. See? Now you've got two people, you've doubled the trauma. And we know that behaviors go downhill. If my dad beat up my mom, then which never happened. I never ever saw anything like that. But if that was the case, chances are, as a boy, I'll be an abuser. And if I'm a girl in the family, I'll think that's perfectly normal and probably hook up with some guy that's going to beat the crap out of me. You see? Because children live what they learn. Children live what they learn. Kathy has a good question. How did you deal with the person who sexually assaulted you in real life? How did you talk to that person? Well, the person that did that was a member of the family. And because I had locked it away and threw away the key, I never even acknowledged that. I never even acknowledged that he was my perpetrator. And I just went on like things were normal. We'd be at family functions. We'd go to weddings. He'd be there. We'd talk. We'd have a hug. Yeah. So I pretended it never happened. And I never ever talked to that person about it. It has been acknowledged, however, to myself and to certain family members that I shared it with. Okay. Because I didn't know what else to do. Because if I revealed it, that might say something about me. So I avoided doing that altogether. So a lot of times we're carrying the secret because our perpetrators will say things like, you tell your mother and I'll burn your house down. You tell your grandmother about this, I will hurt her. So oftentimes victims of sexual assault, and I love to do a whole show if anybody out there has been sexually assaulted and you would love to come on the air with me, I would love to do a show around sexual abuse. So because when you're sexually abused like that, do you know there are 25 sexual responses to that? Just in the sexual department of our lives, we either don't ever have sex at all, we become promiscuous, there's 25 different sexual behaviors that come out of being sexually abused. I have the list here somewhere. That's another day. That's just one area of our life. Not to mention that I didn't trust anybody after that because I thought, wow, if you can't trust your family, who are you going to trust? So very big trust issues. That's another byproduct of sexual assault. Huge trust issues. Can't trust men. If their lips are moving, you think they're lying. So I punished myself. I punished myself. I missed out on a lot of good relationships and friends because I couldn't trust it. That's traumatic. Just that whole thing, not being able to trust, that's huge. That changes your life forever, and it limits you and it blocks you. It does so much damage. It's just terrible. So what are some other things I did? Well, I decided, you know what? I have some things that I have never talked about to people. I have things that are concerning me that I need to get on the table, because when you share a burden with another person, it lightens the load. And so I had some very good people come into my life in my 40s who were able to support me because they were smart enough to see the fake behaviors, pretending everything was great. Somebody would say to me, so, how's your marriage? It's just wonderful. Oh my gosh, I was so good at that. How are you feeling? Oh, I just feel terrific. When I felt like crap, I was a liar. Classic. I lied all the time to myself. My narratives were just big piles of lies. So I had to come out of denial about the fact, hey, you know what? That did bother me. Yes, that did hurt me. Yes, that did disappoint me. Yeah, I'm angry about that. And I just got honest with myself. And I had some good people around me who could support me in that, which inspired me so much. I created my own way of helping people with all that. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm an educator. So I started building curriculum to support people, to help them manage their trauma. Because the first thing that trauma does to you, it makes you feel unworthy. Can you imagine being 12, being sexually assaulted, how I felt about myself after that? I was ashamed. I felt dirty. I thought that was wrong, but it felt good. So maybe it's right. I was completely confused about a lot of things. A lot of things. And I was blinded to the fact that I was stepping into a marriage that was going to be completely traumatic the whole time for 15 years. See? So if you don't clean up the trauma or manage it, then your next decisions become more traumatic. It's like a big mushroom. It just keeps growing and growing and growing and getting worse and worse. So that's why we want to do our events called Staying Alive. There are a lot of people out there who are alive, but they don't know how to live. They don't know how to find the joy in their life. They don't know how to be productive. They're blaming others. They're making excuses. They're procrastinating. They're sick all the time. That's the trauma. And only now, 30 years later, after I said this 30 years ago, but now you're hearing our professionals make comments like this. Well, if he's on drugs, he must have had a traumatic event when he was a child. You think? How about he had a whole bunch of traumatic events when he was a child? And until those are cleaned up, we can't move forward. It's hard to move forward and be productive and enjoy ourselves. Most people are so unhappy. They don't know how to have any fun. They don't know how to get out there, put themselves out there. They don't know how to speak up, defend themselves, ask for what you need, ask for what you want. And once you learn how to do that, you let the trauma work for you. Work for you and not in spite of you. So I know how it feels to be sexually assaulted. Therefore, I am credible in helping other people manage the trauma that went with that because I was there. I know that. See, there's a difference, and we talk about this all the time. There's a difference between credentials and credibility. Credentials, that's the paper on the wall, your master's, your doctorate, your social work degree, all the credentials that you have. But your credibility is your experience, and that's more valuable. People don't connect to your credentials. They connect to your credibility.
The Disability Channel would like to thank our existing sponsors. We really appreciate the support and kindness from the BIAs across the GTA, Ontario, Canada, and our friends in the USA. We love making new friends. Thank you for supporting our existing employment programs.
And what you're willing to share about you, your vulnerability. That's your credibility, what you know. And what you know is based on what you've experienced. So in fact, the more traumatic your journey, the more traumatic your trail, the more you have to offer. And this is what people don't understand. The more you're willing to be open and vulnerable about your trails of trauma, that gives other people permission to share theirs, which is healing, and they can get on with it. You see, it's so insulting when you hear people say things like, oh, get over it. That's what they're saying to our Indigenous people after generations, 5 generations to be exact, of punishment and genocide, 5 generations. And they're saying, oh, get over it. I don't think so. We have a lot of work to do. So the more you keep inside, the more secretive you are, the more private you are, the less people you're going to help. And if you don't want to help people, then what are you doing here? Say, serving others is very, very natural. It's a good thing. Make sense? All right. So here are some questions I ask people who want to heal or manage. Sometimes we don't completely heal. I didn't. Guess what? But manage. And be okay with it. It's okay. It's okay. And that's why people struggle with their trauma, because they've got a narrative going on that it's not okay. You know what? You're bigger than all that. You're stronger than all that. You just don't know it yet. So one of the questions I ask is, if you had the power to change one thing in your life, what would it be? What would it be? If you could change anything right now, would it be your marital situation, your finances, your career, your health? What would you change? Because if you're not able to make that change on your own, we're here to help. Other people are here to help. But if you had the power to change one thing, and the thing that's preventing you from making that change is connected to the trauma. Get it? It's the trauma, the veil, the cloudy vision. There's, it's like, how they say sometimes people have no filter. Oh, we got lots of filters. Because when I go to church, I wear this filter mask. When I'm with my friends, I wear this mask. When I'm with my parents, I wear this mask. When I go to a party, I've got another mask on. Those are the veils of trauma, because we're always adjusting ourselves to fit in and not be our authentic self, because we don't even know who that is anymore or what it looks like, because we're so busy pretending. We all should have Oscars for the acting that we do. if you had the power to change one thing. So what do you need to do that? Well, you absolutely need more self-worth to do that. You need more confidence to do that. And you need the communication skills that will support you in that. Those are the only three things you need to control your trauma. Knowing that you have value anyway, no matter what happens to you, you have value. I just want you to pretend for a moment. Help me out here. I don't have one with me, but I often do this with my teenagers. I'll say, okay, let's just pretend. Just give me a minute here because I just thought of this. I don't use any notes. I've just been talking with you. I don't know how to do that. So I just talk from my heart and my authenticity and my vulnerability and my experiences. Okay, so let's say this is a $20 bill. So I'll say to my teenagers, okay, what's that worth? That's worth $20. Okay, so if I ball it all up, what's it worth now? Well, it's still worth $20. Okay, what if the corner is torn off? What's it worth? It's still worth $20. If I throw it on the ground and I spit on it and I stomp on it, what's it worth? It's still worth $20. So if you think about your trauma, and maybe you were sexually assaulted, maybe there were moves involved, you had no mom or no dad, maybe there wasn't enough food in the house, all the traumas we talked about, it doesn't change your value. And that's the missing link, right? Self-worth, the missing link. That's why we called it that. And then I might ask people, well, what are you doing right now to make those changes? What are you doing? I'm not doing anything. I just watch a lot of television. I go shopping. I take my dog out. These are things that I hear people say. Okay, that's not going to cut it. You have to confront it. You have to embrace it. You have to take it on. And how would your life be different if you had already made those changes? You'd probably be richer. You'd probably maybe have someone in your life that you're in love with. You might have, living somewhere different and special. What are you holding back for? And that's how I talk to people. I ask them questions because we have all been traumatized. Face it. I had to face all mine. And I had some very good people help me. And that's what I do. And that's what I've been doing for 32 years, is really supporting people as they embrace, confront, and process those traumas. But if you're going to let your traumas determine whether you stay alive or not, whether you stay well or not, whether you, do your favorite thing on the planet or not, that's a decision. So I either decide I'm going to do something about it, or I'm not. And if you choose not to, then you need to be prepared to face the consequences of more trauma. Because all you're going to do is invite more of it. You're going to continue to invite it into your life. And when it does happen, like for me, I didn't invite that operation that I had to have or that sickness that I had. I didn't invite that. But when it landed, I could manage it and I was okay with it. And I didn't lay around feeling sorry for myself or, oh my God, is this the end? Or I didn't even go there. But I had to learn how to do that. I had good people who taught me how to do that. And that's how I deal with everything now. If somebody doesn't want to speak to me or they don't want to be my friend or somebody in the family that can't let go or forgive me for mistakes I made or whatever, really, that's not my trauma. That's their trauma. That's theirs. And they're still living it out. Can you imagine how painful that is? That's how we get sick. All right. Well, that's Wednesday Wellness, and thank you for supporting me in my solo show. I love doing my solo shows because I can go off on a lot of tangents, and I'm hoping that the information today will support you in realizing that your trauma is as natural as the good stuff. But don't let your trauma keep you from embracing the good stuff that is there for you and available as well. I'm Dr. Laurie Davis. You've been watching the Today Show, and tomorrow we will be back with our Veterans Show, Miss Jill Younghusband, and we have a very special guest tomorrow. So I look forward to that, and have a great rest of the day. And please, the one thing I just ask is you share the show. I'm confident that information we talked about today would relate for a lot of people. So let's get her done. All right, let's do it. Share the show. All right, bye for now.
Made me believe I needed you, but the truth is you didn't want to lose. Said you'd never fool me, but the thing is that I don't agree. Made it seem like you're the only one.